The transport ship broke through the purple clouds of Vraxis Prime, and Daehyun felt his stomach tighten. He had been to many worlds in his 5 years as a security contractor, but something about this place felt wrong. The planet below looked beautiful, with its crystal formations that stretched like frozen lightning across the dark continents. Yet every instinct he had developed in combat zones was screaming at him to turn back. He stood in the observation deck, watching the planet grow larger. Around him, the other guards were unusually quiet. There were 12 of them, representing different species from across the Galactic Council. The Krell Guard, a massive creature covered in blue scales, kept checking his plasma rifle even though he had already checked it 5 times. The Heston twins, insect-like beings known for their fearlessness, were clicking their mandibles in what Daehyun had learned was a sign of nervousness. Ambassador Hyejin approached him, her footsteps light on the metal floor. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, she carried the weight of humanity's reputation on her shoulders. Humans were still the new species in galactic politics, barely 20 years since first contact. Most aliens saw them as weak, primitive, and not worth much attention. "You feel it too," Hyejin said quietly, standing beside him. Daehyun nodded. "The others are scared. I've worked with the Krell before. They don't scare easily." "The Vraxians have that effect," said a voice behind them. Taeyong stepped forward, his pale skin almost glowing in the ship's lights. He was Vraxian, but he had lived among other species for decades, serving as a liaison. His people rarely left their world, and he was one of the few exceptions. "My people are not like yours. We do not welcome visitors. We do not need allies. The Council has been trying to establish formal contact for 200 years. "Then why did they agree to meet us now?" Hyejin asked. Taeyang's expression was difficult to read. "Because Queen Mirai wanted to, and what the Queen wants happens. That is all I know. That is all I was told." The ship began its descent toward the landing platform. Through the windows, Daehyun could see the Vraxian capital rising before them. It was not built, it was grown. Massive crystalline structures twisted upward, some reaching thousands of feet into the sky. They pulsed with internal light, shifting between colors that hurt to look at directly. The entire city seemed alive, breathing with energy that made his skin prickle. They landed smoothly, and the delegation gathered in the main airlock. Besides the guards and Ambassador Hyejin, there were diplomats from 6 other species. Each one represented powerful civilizations with thousands of years of history. Earth, by comparison, was an infant on the galactic stage. The airlock opened, and Daehyun's first breath of Vraxian air tasted like metal and ozone. A welcoming party waited for them, 10 Vraxian soldiers standing in perfect formation. They wore armor that seemed to be made of the same crystal as their buildings, and their faces were hidden behind helmets that reflected the world around them like mirrors. One stepped forward and removed their helmet. It was a woman with features that were almost human, but her eyes glowed with a soft silver light. Her voice was strange, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "I am Jiwon, captain of the Royal Guard. You will follow me. You will not deviate from the path. You will not touch anything. The Queen is generous to grant you this audience. Do not waste her time." She turned without waiting for a response and began walking toward the fortress. The delegation followed, with the guards forming a protective circle around the diplomats. Daehyun took his position near Ambassador Hyejin, his hand resting near his sidearm, even though he knew it would probably be useless here. The path took them through streets that were empty of people. Daehyun saw movement in the windows above, shadows watching them pass. The crystal buildings hummed with power, and he could feel vibrations through the soles of his boots. It was like walking on the skin of some massive sleeping creature. They entered the fortress through gates that were 50 feet tall. The interior was even more unsettling than the exterior. The walls were not solid but seemed to contain swirling patterns of light and shadow. In alcoves along the corridor, Dae-hyun saw what at first looked like statues. Then he realized they were preserved bodies, aliens from dozens of species, frozen in various poses of defeat and agony. Trophies, Tae-yang whispered. Every species that has ever challenged Vraxian authority. Every army that has ever marched against us. They are kept here as a reminder. One of the other diplomats, a Felnar with golden fur, made a sound of distress. "This is barbaric." "This is history," Ji-won said without turning around. "We do not hide from what we are." The guards were becoming more agitated. The Krell's scales had turned a darker shade of blue, which Dae-hyun knew meant extreme stress. The Heston twins were clicking constantly now, their antennae lying flat against their heads. Even the Torgun guard, a species known for their mental discipline, was sweating despite the cool temperature. They descended deeper into the fortress, taking ramps that spiraled down into the heart of the structure. The pressure in Dae-hyun's ears changed, and he felt something else, something harder to define. It was like a weight pressing against his thoughts, trying to push its way into his mind. Finally, they reached a massive set of doors, carved from a single piece of black crystal. Ji-won stopped and turned to face them. "Beyond these doors is the audience chamber. You will be in the presence of Queen Mirai. She is the absolute ruler of Vraxis Prime and the surrounding systems. She has ruled for 3,000 years. She has ended rebellions with a thought. She has destroyed fleets without lifting a weapon. You will show respect. You will answer when spoken to. You will not approach the throne unless commanded." Ji-won looked at each of them in turn, her glowing eyes lingering on the guards. "If you cannot handle what is beyond these doors, leave now. There is no shame in admitting your limits. But once these doors open, there is no turning back." None of the diplomats moved. They had come too far to turn back now. The guards shifted uncomfortably, but they held their positions. Dae-hyun felt the weight against his mind increase. His head started to ache, a dull throb behind his eyes. Whatever was beyond those doors, it was already reaching out to them, testing them, measuring their worth. Ji-won nodded once, then placed her hand on the door. It began to open, and light spilled out, bright and cold. The pressure intensified, and Dae-hyun heard someone behind him gasp. The audience chamber of Queen Mirai awaited them, and nothing in their preparation had made them ready for what they were about to face. The doors opened fully, and the pressure hit Dae-hyun like a physical blow. His vision blurred for a moment, and he had to lock his knees to keep from stumbling. Beside him, Ambassador Hyejin made a small sound of pain, but kept moving forward. Behind them, he heard the clatter of weapons hitting the floor as one of the guards dropped their rifle. The audience chamber was enormous, so large that Dae-hyun could not see the far walls through the strange light that filled the space. The floor was smooth black crystal that reflected everything like dark water. The ceiling was lost in shadows high above, but he could see shapes moving up there, things that might have been decorations, or might have been alive. And at the center of it all, sitting on a throne that seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed and flowed like water frozen in time, was Queen Mirai. She was beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at. Her features were similar to a human woman's, but perfected, smoothed into something that seemed more like an idea of beauty than the real thing. Her skin had a faint silver glow, and her hair moved as if in a constant breeze that Dae-hyun could not feel. She wore robes that seemed to be made of light itself, shifting colors with each breath she took. But it was her eyes that struck him hardest. They were entirely silver, no pupil, no iris, just pools of liquid metal that seemed to look through him rather than at him. And when those eyes swept across the delegation, the pressure in Dae-hyun's head spiked so sharply that he tasted blood. The queen did not speak with her mouth. Her voice simply appeared in his mind, resonating like a bell struck inside his skull. "Welcome, travelers from the Council. I am Mireille, and you stand in my domain." The first casualty happened immediately. The Felnar diplomat, the one with golden fur, simply collapsed, his legs folded under him, and he hit the floor hard, unconscious before he could even try to catch himself. One of the Heston twins followed a second later, their insect body crumpling like paper. Dae-hyun felt the pressure trying to do the same to him. It was like something vast and impossibly heavy was pressing down on his thoughts, trying to flatten his consciousness into nothing. His nose began to bleed, warm blood running over his lips. But he had trained for pain. He had survived situations where giving up meant death. He planted his feet and refused to fall. Around him, chaos erupted among the guards. The Krell guard, the massive soldier who had fought in a dozen wars, turned and ran. His scales had gone pale with terror, and he was making sounds Dae-hyun had never heard from his species before. The Torgun guard followed, and then 3 others, their discipline shattered by the overwhelming presence of the Queen. Ambassador Heejin was on her knees, both hands pressed to her temples. Her face was white with pain, and her breath came in short gasps. The other diplomats were in similar states, those who had not already fallen unconscious. Only Tae-yang remained standing among them, though even he looked strained. Queen Mireille watched this all happen with no expression on her perfect face. When she spoke again, her mental voice was tinged with something that might have been curiosity. "Interesting. Most break immediately, some run. A few endure for a time." Her silver eyes fixed on Dae-hyun. "But you, human, you still stand, you bleed, you suffer, yet you do not fall or flee. Why?" Dae-hyun's head felt like it was splitting open. Every thought was an effort, like moving through thick mud. But he had been asked a direct question by a queen who could probably kill him with a thought. He needed to answer. "Because," he said, his voice rough and strained, "someone has to." The queen tilted her head, a gesture that was eerily human. She stood from her throne, and the movement was like watching liquid metal pour upward. She was tall, easily 7 feet, and as she stepped down from the platform, the pressure intensified with each footstep. Dae-hyun's vision grayed at the edges. His knees trembled. Blood dripped from his nose onto the crystal floor. But he had positioned himself between the queen and the fallen ambassador Heejin, and he was not going to move. His hand had drifted to his sidearm, though he had not drawn it. He knew it would be useless, but the instinct to be ready was too deeply ingrained. Queen Mireille noticed the gesture. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "You would fight me? With that primitive weapon? You who can barely stand in my presence?" "If I have to," Dae-hyun said. Each word felt like lifting a boulder. "My job is to protect these people. That doesn't stop just because the threat is bigger than me." The queen stopped about 10 feet away from him. This close, Dae-hyun could feel the power radiating from her like heat from a fire. She was studying him the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. He felt something brush against his thoughts, trying to push deeper into his mind. Human minds were messy places. Dae-hyun's was particularly so after years of combat and training. He thought about everything at once. His mind jumping from memory to memory, worry to worry, plan to plan. He thought about his sister back on Earth, about the mission, about the pain in his head, about what he was going to eat later if he survived this, about the Queen's eyes, about the blood on his uniform. His thoughts were a storm with no order, no structure. The Queen's presence in his mind recoiled slightly, and for the first time she showed surprise. Her perfect features shifted into a frown. "What manner of creature are you? Your mind is chaos. There is no order, no discipline, just noise and contradiction. How do you function like this?" "We're human," Dae-hyun said, and despite everything, he almost laughed. Chaos is kind of our thing. The queen circled him slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Dae-hyun forced himself to stay still. Though every instinct was screaming at him to move, to run, to do anything but stand there while this impossibly powerful being studied him. "In 3,000 years of rule," Queen Mirai said, "no being has stood before me without preparation, without shields, without genetic enhancement. Lesser minds crumble, stronger minds bend, all submit to my will." She stopped in front of him again. "Yet you do not. Not because you are strong, I can feel that you are not. Your mind should have shattered the moment you entered this chamber. So tell me," human called Dae-hyun, "how do you still stand?" Dae-hyun had to think about that. The truth was, he did not really know. He was not special. He was not the strongest, smartest, or bravest person he knew. But he was here, and these people needed him, and that meant he could not fall. "Maybe," he said slowly, "it's because I'm too stupid to know when to quit." Behind him, he heard Ambassador Hyejin make a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The queen's expression was unreadable. "Stupidity," she repeated, "or stubbornness. The line between them is thin." She turned and walked back toward her throne. With each step she took away from him, the pressure eased slightly. "Your ambassador wished to speak with me." "Very well, let her speak. And you, human guard, you may stand while we talk. You have earned that much." Ji-won appeared from somewhere, helping Ambassador Hyejin to her feet. The ambassador was shaking but determined. Other Vraxian attendants were carrying out the unconscious delegates and helping those who could still walk. The guards who had fled were nowhere to be seen. Dae-hyun remained standing, blood still dripping from his nose, his head pounding with the worst headache of his life. He had survived the first meeting with Queen Mirai, but he had a feeling that the real test was still to come. Ambassador Hyejin stood on shaking legs, supported by Ji-won. Her face was still pale, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Dae-hyun felt pride despite the pain in his skull. The ambassador was tougher than she looked. "Your Majesty," Hyejin began, "the Galactic Council sends its regards and requests formal diplomatic relations with the Vraxian Empire. We believe mutual cooperation would benefit both our peoples and strengthen the stability of this region of space." Queen Mirai had returned to her throne, and though the pressure had decreased, it still felt like standing in deep water. The queen's silver eyes remained fixed on Dae-hyun even as she addressed Hyejin. "The council has made this request before, many times. I have always refused. Tell me why this time should be different." Hyejin began to outline the benefits, the trade agreements, the security arrangements, all the carefully prepared arguments that the diplomatic team had spent months crafting. But Dae-hyun could tell the queen was not really listening. Her attention kept returning to him, studying him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. Finally, the queen raised one hand, and Hyejin fell silent immediately. "Enough. I have heard these words before in different languages from different species. They are all the same." She stood again, and this time when she moved, it was directly toward Dae-hyun. "I am more interested in your guard. The human who stands when others fall." Dae-hyun straightened despite the pain. The queen stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the way her silver eyes swirled like liquid metal. "Your species," she said, speaking directly to him now, "is barely out of its cradle. You have no natural defenses, no telepathic abilities, no enhanced strength or speed. By all measures, you should be among the weakest species in the council. Yet here you are, standing in my presence while veterans of a dozen wars fled in terror. I wish to understand why." She reached out, and before Dae-hyun could react, her fingers touched his forehead. The contact was cold, impossibly cold, and suddenly, The pressure in his mind was not just around him, but inside him, flowing through his thoughts like ice water through his veins. He saw his memories flashing past, the Queen sifting through them like pages in a book, his childhood in Busan, the smell of the ocean, his decision to join the military, his first combat operation, the friends he had lost, the moment he had decided to leave Earth and work as a contractor in space, his sister's face when he had said goodbye. But more than the memories, the Queen was examining how he thought. She was inside the chaos of his mind, trying to understand the pattern, and what she found seemed to confuse her. Dae-hyun's thoughts were never still. Even now, in pain, under her examination, his mind was thinking about a dozen things at once. He was worried about Ambassador Hyejin. He was wondering if he would survive this. He was remembering a joke his sister had told him. He was thinking about the protocol for diplomatic situations. He was noticing a crack in the crystal floor. He was feeling hungry. He was scared. He was determined. All of these thoughts existed at the same time, contradicting each other, overlapping, making no logical sense. The Queen withdrew her hand, and the cold pressure retreated slightly. She looked at him with something that might have been respect or might have been confusion. "Remarkable," she said. "Your species should not be able to function with minds like this. There is no order, no hierarchy of thought. You think in streams that split and merge and contradict themselves constantly. It is like trying to hold water." She paused. "And yet this chaos protects you. My power breaks organized minds by overwhelming their structure. But your mind has no structure to break. It simply flows around the pressure, adapting, changing shape, but never shattering." She turned to address the chamber, though the only ones left conscious were Dae-hyun, Hyejin, Tae-yang, and Ji-won. "I have ended rebellions by projecting my will across entire planets. I have made armies throw down their weapons with a thought. I have broken the minds of champions and kings. But I cannot break this human." She looked at Dae-hyun again. "Not because he is strong, but because he is flexible. Not because he resists, but because he adapts. Tell me, Dae-hyun, what is it that keeps you standing? What is in your mind that acts as your shield?" Dae-hyun had to think about that. The truth was complicated and messy, like everything about being human. "I don't know if I can explain it properly," he said. "But I guess it's because I'm thinking about a lot of things. I'm scared. I'm in pain. But I'm also thinking about my job, about protecting the ambassador. I'm thinking about my sister back home. I'm thinking about what dinner might be later. I'm remembering a funny story. All of these things at once. Maybe the fear and pain can't take over completely because there's too much other stuff in the way." The Queen considered this. Emotional chaos as a defense mechanism. Fascinating. Your species evolved without natural mental shields, so you developed something else entirely. A mind so fractured and scattered that it cannot be easily dominated. She almost smiled. The other species see humans as weak. Perhaps they are looking at the wrong kind of strength. Ambassador Hyejin found her voice again. "Your Majesty, if I may ask, why are you so interested in human mental resistance? What does this have to do with diplomatic relations?" Queen Mirai returned to her throne and sat. The pressure in the room decreased further, enough that Hyejin could stand without support. "Because, Ambassador, I did not invite you here for the reasons you think. The Council believes I seek trade or alliances. They are wrong. I invited you here because I needed to test something. A theory about your species." "What theory?" Hyejin asked carefully. "That humans possess qualities that may prove valuable in the times ahead. Qualities that other species lack." The Queen's expression grew serious. "Forces are moving in the dark spaces between stars. Threats that even the Vraxian Empire may not be able to face alone." I needed to know if the rumors about human tenacity were true or just pleasant stories. She gestured at Dae-hyun. This one has shown me they are true. He should have fled or fallen, but he did neither. Not because he is brave, though he is, not because he is strong, though he endures, but because his species has a quality we Vraxians have never possessed, we who are so powerful that few dare challenge us. What quality? Dae-hyun asked. The refusal to accept the logical outcome. You humans do not surrender, even when surrender is the only rational choice. You do not break even when breaking is inevitable. You are, by all objective measures, absurd. And that absurdity may be exactly what the galaxy needs. Ji-won stepped forward. Your Majesty, surely you do not mean to trust the defense of our empire to these weak creatures? Weak. Queen Mireille laughed, and the sound echoed through the chamber like bells. Ji-won, you are one of my finest warriors. You have trained for 200 years. You carry weapons that could level cities, yet you could not stand in this human's place for even a minute. Who then is truly weak? Ji-won looked at Dae-hyun with new eyes, reassessing him. The queen stood once more. Dae-hyun of Earth, I have a proposal for you. You wish your delegation to succeed. You wish for your species to gain recognition and alliance. I will grant this, but only if you can prove yourself worthy through trials that will test everything your species claims to be. Dae-hyun felt his stomach sink. What kind of trials? 3 tests, body, mind, and spirit. Pass them, and I will grant your ambassador everything she asks for. Humanity will have the full support of the Vraxian Empire. Fail, and your delegation will be sent home, and humanity will be barred from Vraxian space forever. Ambassador Hyejin started to protest, but Dae-hyun raised his hand slightly. He looked at the queen, at those swirling silver eyes that held 3,000 years of power and knowledge. And if I refuse, then we continue as we have been. Your ambassador speaks, I listen, nothing changes. The galaxy continues on its slow path toward darkness, and we all discover too late whether we were strong enough. Queen Mireille tilted her head. But you will not refuse, because humans do not refuse challenges, even impossible ones. It is what makes you remarkable and foolish in equal measure. She was right, and Dae-hyun knew it. He looked at Ambassador Hyejin, who gave him a small nod. The choice was his, but they both knew there was really only one choice. I accept, Dae-hyun said. Queen Mireille smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. Good. Rest tonight. Tomorrow your trials begin. The quarters they gave Dae-hyun were more luxurious than anywhere he had ever stayed. The bed was large enough for 4 people, and the walls were made of crystal that showed images of alien landscapes when he touched them. But he could not sleep. His mind kept going over what he had agreed to, and what it might mean if he failed. Ambassador Hyejin came to see him before dawn. She looked tired, but determined. You did not have to accept, she said, sitting in one of the chairs near the window that looked out over the Crystal City. Yes, I did, Dae-hyun replied. This is bigger than just a diplomatic mission now. The Queen saw something in us, in humans, that she thinks is important. If I had refused, we would have proven her wrong. Hyejin smiled sadly. You know that the trials might kill you. The Queen spoke of tests that have defeated champions from other species. You are just a security contractor from Busan. Just a contractor, Dae-hyun repeated, looking at his hands. They were scarred from years of work, ordinary hands belonging to an ordinary man. Maybe that is enough. Maybe being ordinary is exactly what is needed. Before Hyejin could respond, the door opened and Ji-won entered. The Vraxian captain's armor gleamed in the soft light. It is time, she said simply. Dae-hyun stood and followed her out. Hyejin walked with them for a while, but at a certain point, Ji-won stopped her. Only the contestant may proceed. This is the rule. Hyejin gripped Daehyun's arm briefly. Come back alive. That is an order from your employer. I will do my best, he promised. Jiwon led him deeper into the fortress, down passages that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Finally, they emerged into an enormous arena. The floor was packed earth, and the walls rose hundreds of feet on all sides. Thousands of Vraxians filled the seats, their glowing eyes making the place look like it was filled with stars. In the center of the arena stood a Vraxian warrior. She was massive, at least 8 feet tall, wearing armor that looked like it had been grown rather than forged. In her hands, she held a staff that crackled with energy. That is Kyung-hee, Jiwon said. She has been our champion for 50 years. She has never been defeated in single combat. She has killed creatures 10 times her size. She will be your opponent for the first trial. Daehyun felt his mouth go dry. You want me to fight her? Not to defeat her. That would be impossible for you. But you must survive for 10 minutes. If you can endure that long, you pass the first trial. Jiwon handed him a simple metal staff, nothing like the energy weapon his opponent carried. Use whatever tactics you wish. There are no rules except to survive. Daehyun took the staff. It was heavy, solid, reassuringly real in his hands. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat, had fought in close quarters more times than he wanted to remember. But this was different. This was fighting someone who was faster, stronger, better armed, and far more experienced. Any advice? He asked Jiwon. She looked at him for a long moment. Do not try to fight like a Vraxian. You will lose. Fight like a human, whatever that means. Then she was gone, and Daehyun was alone in the arena. He walked to the center where Kyung-hee waited. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Her silver eyes regarded him with curiosity. You are the human who stood before the queen, she said, her voice deep and resonant. I am curious to see what you are capable of. A gong sounded, echoing across the arena, and Kyung-hee attacked. She was fast, incredibly fast. Her staff came at him in a blur, and Daehyun barely got his own weapon up in time to block. The impact sent shocks up his arms, and he was driven back several steps. She did not pause, following up with a spinning strike that he ducked under, feeling the wind of its passage over his head. For the first minute, all Daehyun could do was defend, block, dodge, retreat. Kyung-hee was testing him, he realized, learning his capabilities. When she decided she had seen enough, she would end this. But Jiwon's words echoed in his mind. Do not fight like a Vraxian. Fight like a human. What did that mean? Humans were not as strong or fast. They could not match alien warriors in direct combat. But humans had survived on Earth for thousands of years by being clever, by adapting, by using the environment and tactics and whatever advantages they could find. Daehyun stopped retreating. When Kyung-hee struck again, instead of blocking cleanly, he partially blocked and partially redirected, letting her momentum carry her staff past him. He struck at her side, knowing the blow would not hurt her through the armor, but it surprised her. She had not expected him to counterattack. He began to move differently, not in the formal patterns of Vraxian combat that he had seen Jiwon use, but in the way he had learned in street fights and military training. He stayed unpredictable, sometimes rolling when she expected him to dodge, sometimes charging when she expected retreat. He used feints and misdirection, anything to make her uncertain. At the 3-minute mark, he deliberately stumbled, and when Kyung-hee moved in for what should have been a finishing blow, he swept her legs with his staff. She did not fall, her balance was too good, but she had to shift her weight, and that gave him time to scramble away. The crowd was making sounds now, their version of excitement or perhaps confusion. Kyung-hee's silver eyes were brighter, and if he was not mistaken, she was enjoying this. Clever, she said. You fight without honor, without form. You use tricks and deception. I fight to survive, Daehyun replied, breathing hard. His arms ached from blocking her blows, and he had several bruises already. That is all I know how to do. Then show me your survival, Kyung-hee said, and attacked again with renewed intensity. The next few minutes were a blur of pain and desperation. Daehyun took hits that drove him to his knees. His staff cracked and then broke, leaving him with just a piece of wood. He grabbed dirt from the ground and threw it at Kyung-hee's eyes when she closed in, not caring that it was dishonorable, only caring that it bought him seconds. He used everything. When she cornered him against the wall, he climbed it, scrambling up the crystal surface using cracks and projections that were not meant to be handholds. When she followed, he dropped on her from above, landing on her shoulders and causing her to stagger. When his weapon was gone, he used his hands and feet and elbows, striking at joints in her armor, going for any weakness he could find. None of it hurt her. He knew that. But it kept her engaged, kept her from simply ending the fight, and it kept him alive. At the 9-minute mark, Daehyun was barely standing. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, and he was pretty sure he had cracked ribs. His makeshift weapon had been reduced to splinters. Kyung-hee stood before him, barely breathing hard, her armor unmarked. "You have courage, human. I will give you an honorable end." She raised her staff for a final strike, and Daehyun knew he could not dodge it. He was too tired, too hurt, but he had to try. He had to survive one more minute. He did the only thing he could think of. He charged forward, inside the range of her weapon, and wrapped his arms around her in something that was half tackle, half desperate hug. She could have thrown him off easily, but the move was so unexpected that she hesitated for just a moment. And then the gong sounded. 10 minutes had passed. The arena erupted in sound. Kyung-hee looked down at Daehyun, who was still clinging to her armor, and she laughed. It was a deep, genuine laugh. "You survived by embracing me, by holding on like a child?" She pushed him back gently, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping. "I have never seen such a tactic. It is absurd." "Did it work?" Daehyun managed to say. "Yes." It worked. Kyung-hee offered him her hand and pulled him to his feet. "You did not fight with strength or skill. You fought with determination and creativity. You adapted to every situation. You refused to give up even when defeat was certain. You fought like a survivor." She bowed to him slightly, a gesture of respect. "You passed the first trial, human. But know this, the next two will be harder." As medical attendants rushed to help him, Daehyun allowed himself a small smile. 1 down, 2 to go. He was still alive, and that was something. They gave Daehyun 1 day to recover from the fight with Kyung-hee. Medical technology on Vraxis Prime was advanced beyond anything on Earth. The Vraxian healers sealed his cuts, mended his cracked ribs, and eased his bruises with devices that hummed and glowed. By the next morning, he felt almost normal, though the memory of the pain remained fresh. Ambassador Hyejin visited him again, bringing news from the rest of the delegation. The other diplomats were recovering but shaken. The guards who had fled were being sent back to their home worlds in disgrace. Only Taeyang remained besides Hyejin, and even he seemed subdued by what he had witnessed. "The entire galaxy will hear about this," Hyejin told him. "Word is already spreading. A human survived 10 minutes against Kyung-hee. Some species are calling it impossible. Others are starting to wonder if they underestimated us." "I got lucky," Daehyun said, though he knew that was not entirely true. Luck had played a part, but so had stubbornness and a refusal to accept defeat. "The second trial is today," Hyejin continued. "Jiwon says it will test your mind rather than your body. She would not tell me more than that." Daehyun nodded. He had been thinking about what that might mean. The Vraxians had telepathic abilities, mental powers that humans did not possess. A test of the mind could be anything. When Jiwon came to collect him, she led him to a different part of the fortress, a tower that spiraled upward into the sky. They climbed for what felt like hours, passing through levels filled with libraries and meditation chambers. Finally, they reached a room at the very top. It was circular, with walls made of crystal that showed the world outside in all directions. In the center of the room sat a Vraxian man who looked ancient, his skin more silver than white, his eyes dimmed with age. But the power radiating from him was immense, different from Queen Mireille's crushing weight, but equally formidable. "This is Sun Wu," Jiwan said. "He is our oldest mentalist, one who has studied the mind for over 2,000 years. He has created the challenge you will face." Sun Wu looked at Daehyun with eyes that seemed to see through him. "Sit, human." Daehyun sat cross-legged on the floor before him. Sun Wu studied him in silence for a long moment. "Your mind is unusual," the old Vraxian said finally. "I have examined the records of your encounter with the Queen. You survived her presence through chaos, through the lack of mental structure that would normally be seen as a weakness. Today, we will see if that same quality can help you navigate the maze I have prepared." "What maze?" Daehyun asked. "A maze of thought and memory, illusion and truth. You will enter a mental space where your perceptions will be tested. You must find your way to the center, where a simple truth waits. Most who attempt this rely on logic and structure to solve it. But logic can be turned against itself, and structure can become a cage." Sun Wu placed one cold hand on Daehyun's forehead. "Do not resist. Allow yourself to enter the maze, and remember, everything you see is real in its own way, but not all real things are true." The world dissolved. Daehyun found himself standing in a corridor. The walls were mirrors, showing infinite reflections of himself stretching away in all directions. He took a step forward, and the reflections moved with him, but not quite in sync. Some moved before he did, others after. A voice echoed around him, Sun Wu's voice, but also not, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Find the center! Find the truth!" Daehyun started walking. The corridor branched, and he chose a direction at random. The path led him to a room that looked exactly like his childhood home in Busan. His mother was there, cooking in the kitchen, and the smell of her kimchi stew filled the air. It was so real, so perfect, that tears came to his eyes. "Daehyun," his mother said, smiling at him, "you have been gone so long. Why did you leave us?" He wanted to stay, wanted to sit at that familiar table and pretend he was home. But Sun Wu's words echoed in his mind. "Everything you see is real in its own way, but not all real things are true." His mother was real in his memories, real in his heart, but this version was not true. It was an illusion designed to trap him. "I am sorry," he said to the image of his mother, and walked past her, back into the corridor. The next room showed him his worst memory, the mission where he had lost friends to an ambush. He saw their faces, heard their voices calling for help that he could not provide. The guilt threatened to swallow him, to pin him in place. But he had learned to live with that guilt, to carry it without letting it crush him. He acknowledged the memory, felt the pain of it, and moved on. Room after room presented him with tests. Some offered happiness, others threatened with fear. Some showed him futures he wanted, others showed him outcomes he dreaded. Logic would have tried to determine which were real and which were false. But Daehyun did not try to logic his way through. He simply felt each situation, trusted his instincts, and moved forward when something felt like a trap, even a pleasant one. He was making progress, he could feel it, but then the maze changed. The corridors began to shift, walls moving, paths closing. He tried to retrace his steps, but found himself in places he had never been. The maze was adapting to him, learning from his choices. Logic would have tried to map the changes, to find a pattern. But Daehyun's mind did not work that way. He stopped trying to navigate and instead closed his eyes. He thought about why he was here, what he was really searching for. The truth at the center of the maze. But what truth? The truth was that he was a human trying to prove his species worthy. The truth was that he was scared and uncertain. The truth was that he kept going anyway, not because he knew he would succeed, but because giving up was not in his nature. He opened his eyes and found himself in a simple room with a single door. Through the door, he could see light. He walked through it and found himself back in the tower room with Sunwoo. The old Vraxian was watching him with an expression that might have been surprise. "How long was I in there?" Daehyun asked. 3 hours, Sunwoo replied. "Most take 6 or more. Some never find their way out and must be pulled back before their minds break." Jiwon stepped forward, looking at Daehyun with new respect. "How did you solve it so quickly?" "I did not solve it," Daehyun admitted. "I just stopped trying to beat it and started following my feelings instead. When something felt wrong, I moved past it. When something felt right, I moved toward it. I trusted my instincts over my logic." Sunwoo made a sound that might have been a laugh. "For 2,000 years, I have refined that maze to challenge the most logical, structured minds in the galaxy. Champions who could calculate millions of possibilities have taken days to escape. And you, human, stumbled through it in hours by trusting your gut." He shook his head. "Your species is absurd. Wonderfully, dangerously absurd." He stood, his old bones creaking. "You passed the second trial. But I must warn you, the third trial is different. It tests neither body nor mind alone, but something deeper. Something I am not certain your species possesses." "What is that?" Daehyun asked. "The strength of spirit to stand alone against the weight of eternity. To face the truth of your own insignificance and not break. That is what awaits you tomorrow." After Sunwoo left, Jiwon escorted Daehyun back to his quarters. They walked in silence for a while before she spoke. "You continue to surprise us," she said. "First, you withstand the Queen's presence. Then you survive Kyung-hee's assault. Now, you navigate Sunwoo's maze in record time. Each time you succeed by doing what should not work." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Daehyun asked. Jiwon considered the question. "I do not know yet. But I am beginning to understand why the Queen is interested in your species. You do not follow the rules that govern other races. You are unpredictable, adaptable, and stubborn beyond all reason. In the ordered galaxy we have known, you are chaos. And perhaps that is what we need." That night, Daehyun stood at his window, looking out over the Crystal City. 2 trials down, 1 to go. He had survived through luck, stubbornness, and a refusal to give up. But the third trial sounded different, more fundamental, more dangerous. He thought about his sister back on Earth, about the people depending on him. He thought about humanity's place in this vast galaxy full of older, stronger species. And he thought about the coming darkness that Queen Mirai had mentioned, the threat she believed required human qualities to face. Whatever came tomorrow, he would face it the only way he knew how, by standing his ground and refusing to break, because that was what humans did. It was, perhaps, what they did best. He finally slept, dreaming of home and of the stars beyond it. The third trial began at dawn. Jiwon came for Daehyun before the twin suns had fully risen over Vraxis Prime. She was quieter than usual, almost somber, and that worried him more than anything she might have said. "Where are we going?" he asked as they descended deep into the fortress, deeper than he had been before. "To the Chamber of Ancients," Jiwon replied. "It is the most sacred place in our empire. Only the Queen and a handful of others are normally permitted to enter. You should feel honored. I would feel better if you told me what I am walking into." Jiwon stopped and turned to face him. In the dim light of the passage, Her silver eyes seemed to glow. "I cannot tell you because I do not fully understand it myself. I have never entered the chamber, but I know that those who do face the accumulated presence of every Varaxian ruler who has ever lived. 3,000 years of queens and kings, their consciousness preserved in crystal, their power still resonating. You will stand before them alone, and they will judge you. Judge me for what? For whether your spirit is strong enough to endure, whether you can face the infinite and not break, whether you truly deserve what you are asking for." She paused. "Many Varaxians have entered the chamber and emerged broken. Some never emerged at all, and they were born with mental defenses you do not possess." Dae-hyun felt cold fear settle in his stomach, but he had come this far. Turning back now would mean failure for his entire species. "I am ready," he said, though he was not sure he was. The door to the Chamber of Ancients was massive, carved from a single piece of black crystal that seemed to absorb light. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly. Ji-won placed her hand on the door, and it began to open slowly, silently. Beyond was darkness so complete that Dae-hyun could not see anything, just black emptiness that seemed to go on forever. "Walk to the center," Ji-won instructed. "You will know when you have arrived. And remember, whatever happens, do not lose yourself. Hold on to who you are, why you are here, what matters to you. That is the only way to survive." Dae-hyun stepped through the doorway, and it closed behind him with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The darkness was absolute. He could not see his own hands in front of his face. He began walking forward, his footsteps echoing strangely, as if the space around him was both vast and close at the same time. He walked for what felt like hours, though it might have been minutes. Time felt strange here. Eventually, he saw light ahead, a soft silver glow. As he approached, the light grew brighter, and he saw what it was coming from: crystals. Thousands upon thousands of crystals, each one containing a figure. They lined the walls, covered the ceiling, extended into the distance as far as he could see. And in each crystal was a Vraxian ruler, preserved perfectly, their silver eyes open and aware. They were not dead. They were sleeping, or perhaps existing in some state between life and death, and all of them were looking at him. The pressure began immediately. It was like Queen Mireille's presence, but multiplied 1,000 times. The weight of 3 millennia of power and consciousness pressed down on him, trying to flatten his mind, to erase his identity, to show him how small and insignificant he was. Dae-hyun fell to his knees. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, his vision grayed. Every instinct was screaming at him to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness behind him felt infinite, and the only light was here, surrounded by the ancients. Voices began to speak, not out loud, but directly in his mind. Not words exactly, but impressions, judgments, questions. What is this creature? So small, so weak, so brief. Why does it dare to stand in our presence? It cannot endure. It will break like all the others. Show us your worth, mortal. Show us why we should acknowledge you. Dae-hyun could barely think through the pain. Each presence in the crystals was like a star, and he was standing at the center of a galaxy, burning in their combined light. His thoughts scattered, his memories fragmented. He was losing himself, losing track of who he was and why he was here. He tried to remember Ji-won's advice. Hold on to who you are, why you are here. What matters to you? Who was he? Dae-hyun, a human from Earth, from Busan. He had a sister named Yuri. He had friends he had lost. He had a job to protect people. He was here representing humanity. Why was he here? To prove humans were worthy, to gain alliance with the Vraxians, to help his species find their place in the galaxy. What mattered to him? His family, his duty, the people depending on him. the future of humanity. He focused on these things, used them as anchors while the storm of power raged around him. But it was not enough. The ancients pushed harder, showing him visions of truth he did not want to see. He saw Earth from space, a small blue marble in an infinite cosmos. He saw humanity's history, the wars, the cruelty, the mistakes. He saw how brief human civilization was compared to the Vraxians, who had ruled their empire before humans had even invented writing. He saw his own life so short, so meaningless in the span of eternity. What was one human life? A candle flame in the wind, gone in a moment, forgotten just as quickly. The ancients were showing him the truth of existence. In the grand scale of the universe, nothing he did mattered. Nothing any human did mattered. They were insects, brief sparks in the darkness, destined to vanish without a trace. And it was true. All of it was true. But Dae-hyun realized something as he knelt there, bleeding and broken. Truth and meaning were not the same thing. Yes, he was small. Yes, humanity was young and brief. Yes, in the cosmic scale, nothing lasted forever. But that did not make his life meaningless. That did not make his choices worthless. His sister's love for him was real, even if it would not echo through eternity. His friends' sacrifices mattered, even if the universe would forget them. The people he protected were important, even if they were temporary. Meaning was not something given by the universe. It was something created by living beings who chose to care about each other despite knowing nothing lasted forever. It was defiance in the face of entropy. It was kindness in the face of cruelty. It was hope in the face of despair. And that, Dae-hyun realized, was the most human thing of all. To know you were insignificant and to matter anyway. To know you would die and to live anyway. To know you would fail and to try anyway. He pushed himself to his feet. The pressure increased, trying to force him back down. The ancients were not pleased that he dared to stand. "I understand what you are showing me," he said out loud, his voice raw. "I understand that I am small, that humanity is young, that we will all be gone someday. But I am still here now, and now is all anyone ever has. So I will stand, I will do my duty, I will protect my people, not because it matters to the universe, but because it matters to me. And that is enough." The pressure continued, but it was not getting worse. The ancients were reconsidering, reevaluating. They had never encountered a mind that could acknowledge its own insignificance and find strength in it rather than despair. Slowly, gradually, the pressure began to ease. The voices in his head changed tone. "Remarkable. It accepts the truth but does not break. It finds meaning in meaninglessness. Perhaps the young ones have their own wisdom. Perhaps smallness is not the same as worthlessness." The light in the crystals pulsed once, and Dae-hyun felt something shift. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement. The ancients had judged him and found him worthy, not because he was strong, but because he was human, and that meant something they had not fully understood until now. The darkness opened, showing him the path back. Dae-hyun walked toward it on shaking legs, and the door opened before him. He stumbled through and collapsed into Ji-won's arms. "It is done," he whispered before consciousness left him. When he woke, he was in the same medical chamber as before, but this time Queen Mireille herself was there, sitting beside his bed. She looked at him with something in her expression he had not seen before. Respect. "You passed all 3 trials," she said softly. "No other species has done so. No other individual has proven what you have proven." She stood and placed one cool hand on his forehead. "You have earned what you came for, Dae-hyun of Earth. Your ambassador will have her alliance. Your species will have our support. And you, personally, have my gratitude." She withdrew her hand. "Rest now. When you wake, we will discuss the real reason I brought you here. The darkness I mentioned. The threat that comes. Your trials were not just for alliance. They were to see if humanity possesses the qualities we will need to face what is coming. Do we? Daehyun asked. Queen Mirai smiled. Yes. Against all logic, against all probability, you do. You are chaos and determination, weakness and strength, brief and eternal all at once. You are exactly what we need. She left him to rest, and Daehyun closed his eyes, feeling for the first time in days that he might actually survive this. The medical chambers released Daehyun 3 days after he emerged from the Chamber of Ancients. During that time, Ambassador Hyejin had been busy negotiating the details of the alliance with Queen Mirai's advisors. The terms were more generous than anyone had dared hope. Trade agreements, technology sharing, mutual defense pacts, and most importantly, recognition of humanity as a full and equal member of the galactic community. When Daehyun was finally cleared to leave, he found the delegation preparing for departure. The other diplomats treated him differently now. Where before they had seen him as merely a hired guard, now they offered respect bordering on reverence. Word of his trials had spread, not just through the Vraxian Empire, but across the entire Galactic Council network. Ambassador Hyejin found him packing his few belongings. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had completed a difficult but important task. You know you are famous now, she said, leaning against the doorframe. The human who passed the Vraxian trials. Some species are calling it propaganda. Others are demanding to know how you did it. And a few are starting to reconsider their opinions about humanity. Daehyun shook his head. I just did what I had to do. I do not think that makes me special. That is exactly what makes you special, Hyejin replied. You do not see yourself as a hero. You see yourself as someone doing a job. That humility, combined with your stubbornness, is very human, and apparently very valuable. Before Daehyun could respond, Jiwon entered the room. The Vraxian captain wore traveling clothes rather than her usual armor. She carried a small pack over her shoulder. I will be accompanying your delegation back to Earth, she announced. The Queen has assigned me as a permanent liaison to humanity. I am to learn your ways, understand your culture, and report back on what makes your species so unusual. Daehyun raised an eyebrow. You are going to live on Earth? For a time, yes. The Queen believes it is important that we understand humans as they truly are, not as we imagine them to be. And she believes I am best suited for this task because I have seen what you are capable of. Jiwon looked at him directly. I confess, I am both curious and concerned. You defeated 3 trials through methods that should not have worked. I need to know if you were an exception or if all humans possess such qualities. You will be disappointed, Daehyun said. I am not special among my people. There are humans much braver, smarter, and stronger than me. If that is true, Jiwon said seriously, then your species is more dangerous than we thought. The journey back to Council space took 2 weeks aboard the Vraxian diplomatic ship that Queen Mirai had provided. It was faster and more comfortable than the transport they had arrived in. During the voyage, Daehyun spent time with Jiwon, teaching her about human customs and answering her endless questions. She was fascinated by human contradictions, how humans could be both violent and compassionate, how they created beautiful art and terrible weapons, how they formed bonds with each other while also competing constantly, how they could believe in hope while acknowledging despair. Your minds are fractured, she observed one day as they sat in the observation lounge, watching space flow past. You hold opposing thoughts simultaneously without difficulty. You can be afraid and brave, doubtful and determined, selfish and selfless. It is illogical, yet it works. Welcome to being human, Daehyun replied with a smile. We do not make sense even to ourselves sometimes. Ambassador Hyejin joined them, carrying data tablets with reports she had been preparing. I have been compiling the analysis of what happened on Vraxis Prime. The political implications are significant. Several species that ignored humanity before are now requesting meetings. The Krell Empire wants to hire human security personnel. The Torgun Collective is asking about cultural exchanges. Even the Felnar, who barely acknowledged us before, are expressing interest in trade negotiations. All because one human survived some trials? Daehyun asked. Because one human demonstrated qualities that the galaxy thought were weaknesses, Hyejin corrected. Adaptability over strength, intuition over logic, emotional resilience over mental discipline. Other species are realizing that humanity might have advantages they overlooked. We are becoming interesting. Is that good? Jiwon asked. Hyejin considered the question. It is better than being ignored, but it also means humanity will face new challenges. Expectations we must meet. Standards we must maintain. We can no longer hide behind our status as the young species. We must prove ourselves worthy of the attention we have gained. The ship emerged from faster-than-light travel near a relay station that served as a hub for Council communications. As soon as they connected to the network, messages began flooding in. Requests for interviews, proposals for meetings, questions from journalists, and congratulations from allies. Among the messages was one marked with the highest priority codes. It was from Earth's government, addressed to Ambassador Hyejin, but concerning Daehyun. When Hyejin opened it and read the contents, her expression shifted to surprise. It seems you have been summoned to address the council directly, she told Daehyun. They want you to testify about what happened on Vraxis Prime. Every species represented in the council will be there. You will be speaking before billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Daehyun felt his stomach sink. I am not a public speaker. I am a security contractor. You are the human who stood before the Vraxian queen when all others fled, Hyejin replied. You are the first person in 3,000 years to pass the ancient trials. You are, whether you like it or not, a representative of what humanity can be. They need to hear from you directly. 3 days later, Daehyun stood in the Grand Council chamber on the station known as Unity's Heart. The chamber was enormous, with seating for representatives from all 1,200 member species. Holographic projections allowed those attending remotely to appear as if physically present. The effect was overwhelming, thousands of aliens of every imaginable shape and size, all watching him. Ambassador Hyejin stood beside him at the speaking platform. Jiwon stood behind them, observing everything with her analytical silver eyes. The council speaker, a Torgun with deep blue skin and a voice like rolling thunder, called the session to order. We gather today to hear testimony from Daehyun of Earth, human representative who recently completed the Vraxian trials. His actions have implications for how we understand humanity's role in the Galactic Council. Daehyun, please share your account of what occurred. Daehyun took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them everything, from the initial meeting with Queen Mirai to the trials he had faced. He did not try to make himself sound heroic. He simply described what happened, what he felt, and how he survived. When he finished, there was silence in the chamber. Then the questions began. How did you withstand the Queen's mental pressure? Asked a Heston representative. I did not withstand it, Daehyun replied honestly. I just refused to fall down. There is a difference. What training prepared you for the mental maze? Asked a Krell diplomat. No training. I just followed my instincts. I stopped trying to think my way through and started feeling my way through. How did you face the Chamber of Ancients without breaking? Asked a Felnar scholar. Daehyun paused before answering that one. I accepted that I am small and brief and ultimately insignificant to the universe, and then I decided that was okay, that I mattered to the people I care about and who care about me, and that was enough. More silence. Then, surprisingly, one of the senior council members, an ancient being whose species had been in space for over 50,000 years, spoke. You describe accepting insignificance as a source of strength. Most species fight against this reality. We build empires and monuments to deny our brevity. We seek to impose meaning on an indifferent cosmos. But you suggest embracing the truth instead. This is a philosophy we have not considered. It is not philosophy, Daehyun said. It is just how humans cope with existence. We know we are temporary. We know the universe does not care about us. So we care about each other instead. We create our own meaning. Maybe that is our real strength, not that we are powerful, but that we do not need to be powerful to find reasons to keep going. The session continued for hours, but Daehyun could feel the shift happening. The council was seeing humanity differently now. Not as weak newcomers who needed protection, but as a species with unique qualities that might prove valuable. It was not the respect born from fear or power. It was something more genuine, respect born from demonstrated character. Later, back on the Vraxian diplomatic ship heading toward Earth, Daehyun stood in the observation lounge with Ambassador Hyejin and Jiwon. Earth hung before them in space, blue and white and beautiful. "Your world is lovely," Jiwon said softly. "Smaller than Vraxis Prime, but vibrant with life." "Home," Daehyun said simply. Hyejin placed a hand on his shoulder. "You changed something important out there. You showed the galaxy that humans are not just another species. We are something different, something the galaxy needs, even if they did not know it yet." "I just stood my ground," Daehyun replied. "That is all I did." "Sometimes," Jiwon said. "That is everything." The ship descended toward Earth, toward the landing platforms where media and officials waited to greet them. Daehyun's life was going to change. Humanity's place in the galaxy was going to change. But for now, he was just glad to be going home. His communicator chimed. It was a message from Queen Mirai, transmitted across the vast distance of space through quantum channels. He opened it and read, "Daehyun of Earth, you have proven what I hope to find. When the darkness comes, and it will come soon, I will call upon you and your kind. Humanity will stand beside the Vraxian Empire as equals, not as subjects. Together, we will face what lurks beyond the light. Until then, live well. You have earned peace, though I suspect you will not find it for long. The brave rarely do." Below the message was a crystal coordinate, a way to contact her directly if needed. Daehyun saved it and looked back at Earth. The Queen was right. Peace would not last. Something was coming, some threat she had foreseen, and when it arrived, humanity would be called to stand once more. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, he was going home. Today, he had succeeded in what he set out to do. Today was enough. The ship touched down on Earth, and Daehyun took his first steps on his home world in over a year. The sun was warm on his face. The air smelled like ocean and life. His sister was waiting for him beyond the security checkpoints, and she would demand to hear everything. He smiled. Whatever came next, whatever darkness approached, humanity would face it the way they had always faced impossible odds. Together, stubborn, and refusing to give up even when giving up made perfect sense. Because that was what humans did best. They stood their ground when others fled. They found hope in hopeless situations. They mattered to each other even when the universe said they did not matter at all. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough.